Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for the first installment of a short series I'm putting together where I'll have discussions with family members of former Rogers Drums employees. Today we're joined by Elaine Strauss Cates, daughter of the late Ben Strauss, who was the head of marketing and artist relations at Rogers, but in reality he was much more than that, being there from the very beginnings of the Grossman era. Thank you so much for joining us, Elaine.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And as I've mentioned in emails that we've been exchanging, we're here to celebrate your dad and his immeasurable contributions to the greatness of Rogers Drums in its formative years and beyond. But we're also here to celebrate the man himself. I have some personal friends who had spoken to your dad over the phone quite a bit and rave about what a wonderful guy he was. But what was he like as a father?
Oh, he was fantastic as a father. He listened. He was very patient. He was very low key, and couldn't have asked for a better father.
That's
And
wonderful.
and he and my mother complimented each other very, very much.
So that on, I don't know if you've seen the interviews I have on my YouTube channel, but is that your mom in the background on the phone?
I guess so. I just found out last week. I don't even know why I went to YouTube. Maybe because you contacted me. I
Hmm.
pressed Rogers Drums Ben Strauss and I saw and heard a couple of the recordings. Now, I also sent that information to my son and he told me that my mom was speaking in the
Hmm.
background. I never heard that one.
Oh, okay.
So I guess this week I should have listened to every single one of them. I only picked one.
Right. Yeah, there's two of them, and it's pretty long, but there's a lot of really, really cool stuff on those interviews back from, I think it was 95 or something like that, 96.
He
Oh,
passed away. He passed away in '97.
was it? Oh, wow. So that
Yeah,
was towards the end of his life, those interviews.
right.
So he was a trumpet player, correct?
He was a trumpet player through high school. And then afterwards he had his own band, and he played all around New York, Pennsylvania, and then he met my mother in Cleveland. I'm not even sure when. They were married in 37.
Wow.
So he was there. My mother was just on vacation. Her family was from Baltimore. And a cousin of my mother's was friends with a sister, one of my father's sisters. And that's how they met. I think they had a very short courtship and they were married, and she moved in 1937 to Cleveland.
So where is he from originally?
Kane, Pennsylvania.
Kane, Pennsylvania.
And I'm not even sure where when he moved to Cleveland, but he graduated high school in Kane.
Hmm.
I never checked to see when he graduated. But
Interesting.
he met Henry Grossman, who was my mother's uncle, I believe when they got married.
I did not know that.
Yes, and he worked at Schubert Music, which Henry Grossman also owned, and then transferred over to Grossman, which was basic. That was the wholesale music into part of it,
Right.
and I guess they purchased Rogers in the '60s.
In
No,
the
in the
in
'50s.
in the
In
early
the late.
50s. So say the name
Okay.
of that company again that Henry Grossman also owned.
Schubert Music Company. It was a store. It was a
It was a
storefront.
store,
Right.
and your dad
And
worked there.
he worked there, and then he segued over to Grossman Music. And I remember Schubert's because I was taking accordion lessons at Schubert's. And I thought my father was working there at the time, but he might have been over at Grossman's already. They were very close to one another.
Right.
They were both in downtown Cleveland.
Right. Wow. So I guess he had started with Rogers in 1953. I think he had stated. You don't know?
Okay, I don't, you know what? I was born in 41.
Right.
My
So you were
my
very
father,
young.
yeah, my father always worked in the music business,
Right.
and I don't know when he went over.
Interesting.
What do you know when Grossman Music started?
Oh, well, Grossman music, I believe, was started in like the 1920s. But
Okay,
they bought Rogers in 52, and I believe in
okay.
that interview your dad says he started with them in 53. But he was already with Grossman Music
Oh,
apparently, and just the transition was smooth, I guess.
oh yes, he was with he was with Schubert's. I was 10 years old. I was taking accordion lessons there, so and I believe he was still at Schubert's then.
That's excellent.
But but honestly, I don't know.
So he was a high-ranking official in Grossman's mind. It sounds like he wanted him around.
Yes, but he wasn't high ranking when he started.
Right, right.
But
Did
yeah.
you ever go over to the offices in Cleveland?
Oh yeah.
What was it
Yes.
what was it like there? Were there any drums around, or was it all just offices, or do you remember?
I don't remember the drums. They certainly not at Schubert's, and I think maybe by that time Schubert's might have been closed.
Right.
And do I remember? Yeah, I guess I do remember drums there, but not a whole lot of them. Not, not like certainly not like Covington.
No,
And
no,
I
not at
and
all.
I never got down to
Oh,
Covington.
you never did go. That was one of my
No,
questions as well. You never
no.
went to the plant in Covington.
I think by the time I was probably I was in the 50s
Mm-hmm.
because I graduated high school in 59,
Mm-hmm.
and that picture of me with Henry, my father, Buddy, and myself, that was right after I graduated high school, and I went to New York for a music meeting, I guess
Right.
it was.
This is Buddy. That's my daughter who was 19 years old at the time. With me with my crew cut. This is Henry Grossman. Have you heard that name? I have heard that name.
And
So that's what I was going to ask you about next. That photo. Do you remember where
yeah,
it was or anything that happened that
it, it,
day?
it was, I guess there was I don't even know what you call it, a seminar
Okay.
of some sort.
Right.
And it was probably in a hotel, and they probably had a big show. And I would assume it was just Rogers,
Mm-hmm.
but
Was
honestly,
this in Ohio?
no, in New York City.
Oh, it was in New York City.
Yes, that
Okay.
picture was taken in New York City.
Okay. So do you have any memories of like Henry Grossman or your dad being around
Oh,
him or?
oh, absolutely. I mean, the family was very close. Henry was my grandmother's youngest brother.
Oh
He
wow.
was always there. I mean, we had, like I say, Henry brought everybody from Baltimore, and there was a lot of family members working in Grossman Music,
Mm-hmm.
and so we were always together.
That's great. He and your dad were pretty close.
Yes, yes, they were close, but it was family and it was business.
Yeah.
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 So
That's a tough thing sometimes.
and but he wasn't the young he my father wasn't the nephew. It was my mother that was his niece.
Right.
So it was a great relationship, and they had meetings every weekend in our house. Basically, most of them were in our house because my father. They all worked for Grossman Music, but my father and Henry and a couple of the other salesmen, they were always meeting. They worked 7 days a week for
Really.
years and years and years. And then they would go into the office. That was one of the things that bothered my mother because it was 7 days a week. But that's how they all were. They
Well
had
put
to
it.
work during those times.
Yeah. Well, they were
Yeah.
they were building something great. They
Yes.
really were, and
Yeah. Yeah.
those were the minds that were doing it all.
Yeah.
How about? I know your dad was very close with Joe Thompson. Do you have any
Oh, yes. I
memories
and
of Joe?
well, just what a nice man he was, and my father said he was a genius. And I don't think Rogers would be where they are today without Joe Thompson.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And
Yeah.
without your dad as well. So,
Uh, I
the,
know, but yeah,
but you're right. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, my dad was very smart.
Yes.
He
Clearly.
never went to college. He graduated high school, I think, at 16, and he had to go to work. He worked in a grocery store, and he worked in a grocery store in Cleveland too. Before he must have met Henry Grossman through my mother. And my
Maybe.
father was already in the music business. He was playing the trumpet. He had a band, but his full-time job was a grocery store.
Do you remember any other people associated with Rogers that were maybe around your dad? Maybe some names of people that we might not
Oh,
always hear of?
yes. And I wrote some of them down, and I don't even know where I put it. I'm not very organized.
That's
But
all right.
Henry Adler, Jody
Okay.
Carver, um, besides all the drummers that were very influential, very helpful to my father.
Yeah.
Um, oh, Don Kennedy.
Right.
And I don't know, oh my goodness, Don Kennedy was my father actually, I'm not even sure how he moved him, but he got him to come to work for Grossman.
Really.
Yeah, and for Rogers.
I
I, I,
actually
yeah.
in this series I have an interview with Don's son, so that should be interesting as well.
Oh, I would love to talk to him. They were Evelyn and Don were very, very close friends of my father's and
That's
my mother.
wonderful.
In fact, I was going through the papers here. I have a wonderful letter from Don and Evelyn after my father passed away that she wrote to my mother.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And oh, we saw a lot of them
So
because my
did you know their children much at all?
I'm not sure that I ever met their children, but
Okay.
my father used to go out to Fullerton when the plant was there for
Oh,
3 months, 3 months during the winter, and I was still living in Cleveland. We went out to visit once, and then we wound up very unexpectedly moving to Phoenix. That was just a fluke.
your dad was on the road a lot as being an artist relations. Was he on the road a lot
He was
away?
he was always on the road. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And then of course every year for 10 years it was 3 months out in Fullerton and then back and forth to Fullerton all throughout the rest of the year. My
Wow.
mother only went with him the 3 months during the winter. And then of course when we moved here, she would come here and my mother would be working in Fullerton. And then
Hmm.
they moved to Phoenix in 85. But by
Wow.
that time my father had retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my uncle Leonard Dreyer, he worked for Grossman's and Rogers, and Melvin Usen, he did. Max Berger and his
Hmm.
son Joe Berger, and then there's Joe's son Richard Berger. The three generations worked for Rogers
Hmm.
and Grossman. There were a few others,
Wow. So these are a lot of
but
names I'm not familiar with. This is great.
right. Yeah.
So in the early years, how often would you say he would be out on the road?
My father,
Yeah.
uh, I would say with Rogers probably once a month, gone for a week someplace. And he was always going back and forth to Covington.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure where the plant
Yeah.
was. I know
Hmm.
your dad was very fond of Buddy Rich, and they were
Oh yes.
quite good friends. Do you have any
Yes.
memories of Buddy or
Oh yes.
being around him?
Yeah.
Or
Oh yeah. Absolutely. In fact, he came here to do a show for my father, I believe. Uh, my father My father was also a Shriner, and he played in the Shrine Band in Cleveland.
Hmm.
And when he moved out to Phoenix, that was the first place he went, and he joined their band. He also went to Phoenix College and Scottsdale Community College and played in both of their bands. There was also a group, and I don't know if it was from Scottsdale Community College or not. I don't. I think maybe some of the members were from there, but it was called Sentimental Swing, and it was a an orchestra that played all over Phoenix, Scottsdale, and they donated their paycheck to charity.
Nice.
And I mean, none of them took a penny from that. And they played very often for different functions.
Wonderful.
And so he was busy until maybe 6 months before his last time that he got ill. So
Wow.
he was always playing. And honestly, the doctors attributed his longevity to the trumpet because he practiced all the time, and he had double pneumonia. He was in a coma in the hospital. They never thought he'd get out, and that was about 2 or 3 years before he passed.
Wow.
And they said the only reason he survived that was because he played the trumpet.
Because the lung
His
exercise,
his lungs were in very
very,
good condition.
very
Yeah,
strong.
yeah.
Wow, that's intriguing. Have any stories about being around Buddy or your dad and him together? I know Buddy loved your dad. They were very
Yes,
close.
yes, they were. I just remember him. He traveled in his big bus,
Yeah.
and it was parked at Scottsdale Community College, and we were all in there sitting after the performance and talking and just reminiscing. And I know that my father, and it might have been for more people than Buddy, my father would personally select their drumsticks, and he would weigh each one. It had to be so many ounces, and if it was over, he would find other ones. He was constantly giving the drummers their drumstick. Everybody that he went to see. I mean, Roy Burns. I don't know if you know who
Yeah.
Roy Burns is.
Yes.
My father spent a lot of time on the road going to all these people and giving them personal attention. And every place he went where they were, with somebody was playing Rogers drums, he would go adjust their drum sets right before the performance because most of them didn't have them adjusted properly,
Right.
and they couldn't believe this one little thing that he would do, and it made a difference. And so he was all over the United States doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
He
So
was meticulous, it seems, and that's
yes,
why it was so important to them, I guess.
yes, yes, yes. And he was like that with everybody. It didn't have to be Buddy Rich.
Hmm.
Anybody that played Rogers drums and that he knew, he would travel any place to help them out.
It seems like he was. I mean, it seems like he just loved what he did and loved
He
the
did.
company because he was an amazing spokesperson for it, just
Yeah,
out on the front lines
yeah,
all the time,
yeah.
and
I
apparently
mean,
loved to talk about it.
yes, yes. Uh, basically, he worked, other than when he worked for his father in a grocery store, he worked for Uncle Henry up until it was sold to CBS. Those were
Right.
his only jobs his
Right.
whole life.
And that's
So,
exactly what I was going to ask you next. When it was sold to CBS, do you remember anything about that? About your dad having any feelings one way or another about what was happening, about it going
yes.
very corporate?
Yeah, it wasn't, he loved working for them in the beginning, but it got to be too corporate. It was too many channels.
Yeah.
When it was at Grossman Music, everybody knew what everybody was doing, and it ran like a clock. But out in California, too many, they didn't have the passion for Rogers
Yeah.
that They also bought Fender guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and they bought Steinway piano. I mean, they didn't last with any of them. There were too many people there, too many different opinions, and it wasn't a family business.
That's
I
it.
know that he loved Armin Zildjian.
Mm-hmm.
They got along very well, and they saw, not often, but they saw each other here in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Armin was living in Scottsdale.
When Rogers was purchased by CBS, did your dad have the same position? Did he stay in the same position?
Well, they, they told Henry they were not going to buy CBS unless my father went with them.
Oh, so that was a
So,
stipulation. If we
oh
buy
yeah,
Rogers, we get Ben Strauss.
yeah, yeah. And my father didn't want to move out there. My mother wouldn't move out there. So they worked it out where my father went back and forth in the beginning, spent more time out there.
Right.
And then once everything got settled, uh, I think the first time I went out there was in 69,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even 70. I don't even know when CBS bought
Well, what
Rogers.
happened was they bought Rogers in 1966, but all of the employees that I've spoken to, and they moved out to California in 69, but
Okay,
all of the employees that I've spoken to suspect that they knew the whole time that they were going to California because they had recently bought Fender and they had a Fender factory out there. And I wonder if your dad knew that.
oh yeah, I'm sure
I
he
mean,
did.
if he knew that as soon as they bought it, that's what they wanted, that's what their intention
Well,
was.
from what I understood, is that they would not buy it unless my father moved out there.
That is amazing.
That may be hearsay, but that's what I remember. That's what we all remember.
Right.
But he didn't agree to move out there.
Right, right.
He said he will go back and forth as many times as necessary,
Hmm.
and that's what he did. He never did move out there. He also had they let's see, Grossman Music was still in. In fact, it may still be in business,
Hmm.
but online. There's no physical plant. But my father had Rogers had a office in Hudson, Ohio, after Grossman's, I guess. Well, no, after it was sold, because it wasn't part of Grossman's. So at that time, there was an office in Hudson, Ohio, which was very close to where we lived. And
Oh,
my father would go out there every day.
really?
Yeah,
In
unless he,
was this post CBS purchase?
no, 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 after,
Yeah,
after.
yeah. Because I know
I,
they had moved everything to Dayton. So was your dad going to Dayton every day from because they took
well, wasn't it Covington?
yeah,
Did
no.
they have an
Well,
office?
they had the plant where they built the drums was in Covington, but when
Okay,
Grossman owned it, all the headquarters was in Cleveland, and then apparently when CBS bought it, they moved the headquarters to Dayton. So, but
okay.
what was in Hudson? There was a business headquarters in Hudson?
Just my father's
Oh,
office
your dad's
that,
office. Got it.
yes, and it was Rogers.
Rogers.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure there was anybody else in that office.
That
I
was
don't know.
that was where
By that,
his
yeah,
Rogers operations were in Hudson.
right, either there or in CBS. And by that time, I had moved out to Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
So I moved in 1970.
Oh, okay.
We brought the family out here. We moved out here with our children were 2, 4, and 6. So I didn't get back to Cleveland too often.
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't think I was ever at that Hudson office.
Interesting.
So that was after we moved out here.
Right. So I know around 67, Buddy Rich had a little bit of a conflict with CBS and left Rogers. Do you remember your dad talking about that at all or being upset about it or saying anything at all about that?
I don't rem I think I remember a little talk, but you mean he left in 67?
Yeah, about 67 he and
But then he came back.
no, Buddy had left Rogers and never came back. I'm sure he and your
Yes.
dad stayed in contact because they were just
Oh, yes,
friends.
yes,
Because they were friends.
yes.
But he had left playing Rogers drums in '67.
Oh, I don't remember that. But I thought he was playing those when he came here because I remember going to the concert.
Mm.
And I believe it was at Scottsdale Community College. And I remember being on his bus
Uh,
and we were out there talking, but maybe he wasn't playing Rogers. I don't know.
If it was after that, what was that, '70s maybe?
Oh, probably, no, probably in the 80s.
Oh yeah, no, he was long gone with Rogers by then.
Oh, okay. See, I
Yeah.
didn't even
But I
realize
mean,
that.
him and your dad, I'm sure, were still very close. It didn't matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Business aside, you know.
Exactly.
Your dad is credited with coming up with such names as like Swivomatic, Dynasonic, things like that. Do you have any
Yes.
do you have any knowledge of any of that, or do you know remember
I
him
just,
speaking about that?
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I never, I mean, I knew he was smart, but he was also clever.
Absolutely.
And oh, yes, I remember that. And see, a lot of that happened at our kitchen table.
Wow.
There, they were seeing Uncle Henry, my father, I forget who else was there, maybe my Uncle Leonard. They were all sitting at the kitchen table and they would just talk and rap and things came out.
And that would be one of the
Yeah.
cases where those names would come about.
Yes. Yeah.
Would Joe Thompson ever be at any of those meetings, or did they talk more over at the factory?
They probably spoke at the factory, but he was at our house. I do remember him being there at the house.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
any other stories come to mind? Anything jog your memory, or things that you
Well,
remember?
well, yes, he was on a trip to Japan for Rogers,
Hmm.
and they had an earthquake, and he was up on the 15th floor.
What?
And of course, fortunately, we heard about it after, but that was something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, he was all over the world.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
So generally, when he would travel for Rogers, was he just by himself, or did he have other
most of the time
representatives?
he was back. Well, I don't know who else went with him then, but I mean, I'm sure he took somebody,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure. I shouldn't say I'm sure he took somebody. I mean, he was able to travel, by himself,
Yeah.
and yeah, he went away a lot.
So you were saying that he would travel back and forth to Fullerton this is when he
Oh
was
yeah.
still working for Rogers.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was for 10 years.
Yeah.
He did that for 10 years.
And then he retired in what, '76? Was it a retirement, or did he?
Um, I don't even remember.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think did he retire from
I don't,
Rogers
I, I don't know if it was a
at
retirement
70?
or they just separated, but I
Well,
think.
he was with them for 10 years. And I believe he had to sign a contract.
Mhm.
And I don't know about the second contract, but the first one was a 5-year contract. And the second, so whatever year he moved out there, he was with them for 10 years. And then it was time for him to retire.
Right.
I think at that point, I think his health was starting to decline,
Hmm.
and it was time to retire. Uh, do you have any correspondence or anything from Harry Kangany?
I do. I'm in touch with Harry. Yes.
Okay, he's wonderful. And I don't know if you know the story that he stopped in Phoenix to see my father.
Right, and he brought him a
And,
drum, right?
well, he asked him any regrets. And he said, the only regret I have is I never kept one thing from Rogers. And so Harry asked him what he would like. And he said, a snare drum, just to have a memory. And he said, what color? He said, absolutely white pearl. And it's here in my house.
You have that drum?
I have that drum. And do you know anything about the MIM?
The which?
The MIM, MIM?
Hmm?
It's a musical instrument Museum in Phoenix.
No, I don't.
It's well, look it up online. It is a fabulous museum, and it happens to be right across the street from where we just moved to.
Really?
Uh, my husband and I are in an independent senior living.
Uh-huh.
We're we're in our own apartment, but we're it's an apartment um, enclave here, and I look out my window and I can see the Mim.
Wow.
And anyway, you look it up because you won't believe what's here. And they have everything but Rogers drums. And we want, my kids want me to donate it. I keep asking them to take it, one of them to take it.
Right.
And they said, no, it belongs in the MIM. And in fact, I have a letter right here from the MIM that they would love it.
May, maybe donate it in his name, right?
Absolutely. You know what? Right now, it's the most precious thing that I have as far as my father's concerned. It was his whole life.
Right.
Roger's music, Grossman music, and Roger. And my kids are just after me every week. You've got to take it over there. You've got to do this. I can't part with it, but I will.
I understand.
I will.
Your dad was very proud of the Dynasonic snare drum. And he shows in that video that's on my YouTube channel, he shows that drum. He holds that drum. Is it anywhere
I know.
in your house that it's accessible? Could I see it?
Oh, the drum? No, it's downstairs in my locker. But this is the picture you're talking about.
Oh, there you go.
You know what? We can call again.
Right.
You know, maybe if you want to do a little touch up, maybe I'll have Chrome by then, and I will get it. It's downstairs in the locker. Here's another. I sent you this
Right.
picture.
Yes, I have those.
This might have been his retirement party, but I'm not sure. I don't have anything written on the back. I'm going to walk you over and show you something.
Okay.
I'm going to turn on some lights. Right. This is, can you see
I
that?
can see that.
Okay, it's from Harry Kangany.
Oh,
And he was president of the Drum Center of Indianapolis. And he wrote this. And it was in a magazine. And
what does that say? The remarkable Ben Strauss, the real Mr. Rogers?
yes.
Excellent.
And so I was trying to send you that article. I've got a lot of this stuff. There's another drum book. This you must have this one,
Right.
the Rogers drum.
Yes, the Rob Cook book, yes.
And I went out and bought 4 of them, and I gave one to each of my children.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any idea. I mean, they do, but they don't really understand
Right.
how important my father was to the drum world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hopefully, maybe something like this or even, I mean, the book alone, there's a lot about your dad in there. There's
Yes.
a lot to be proud of about their grandfather. So,
Yes.
and I think the fact that you have that drum is just absolutely incredible. I understand that it's probably going to be tough to part with, but isn't there a way that you don't have to give them the drum? You could just kind of like,
Probably once it leaves me, it doesn't matter.
yeah,
But it's not for the value. It's just sentimentally.
of course, yeah.
It's just, but I know that I have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I do. But, at 82, you never know. I should do it, but
Right. Tough to part with.
it really is. It was my father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what? So just to kind of wrap up, he retires from Rogers and he's living in Phoenix.
I don't know. Let's see, 70. He went out there, 72, 80. He probably retired in 80,
Okay.
somewhere around 1980. Or if he went with them in 70, I mean, in 67, then 77, somewhere between 1977 and 1980, he retired. They moved here in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been talking about it since the day he retired. And my mother just, she couldn't leave Cleveland. Her sister was there.
Mm-hmm.
And even though both my sister lived in New Jersey and moved here 6 weeks before my father passed away.
Oh, wow.
So she got to spend the last 6 weeks with him, and every day we were with him because at that point he was failing.
Right.
And but it was a blessing that my father moved here in 85, and like I say, he passed away in 97.
Yes.
So that was a wonderful 13 years for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So his post Rogers life, what did he ever get into anything else, or he just kind of relaxed?
He worked on the computer a lot.
Yeah.
That's another story. Our middle son in high school wanted a computer, so we bought him a computer, a little square Apple,
Mm-hmm.
little box with a floppy disk, and he used that. And when he graduated up to the next level, we bought him another one, and he gave me that one with the floppy disk. So that's how I learned. And I don't know why we didn't buy my father. I mean, he could have afforded a computer, but he didn't know about a
Right.
computer. And I gave him this little one with the floppy disk. You should have seen what he did on it. He wrote music. We at that time you bought these software packages to put in the floppy
Yeah.
disk. My father was writing music on that computer and playing it. I mean, none of us could get over it. And then he got ill, so at that point we didn't think about it.
I
So
love to hear that he was doing that, writing the music. And I know even long after his retirement, he loved talking Rogers. I have friends who, my one friend
yes,
Rick Giles, said he would call him every once in a while, and they would have be on the phone for an hour or more. And my
absolutely,
friend Rick tells a story that he called him once with a question, and your dad said he was just about, he said he heard your mom calling him for dinner. And Rick was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. Just you go have dinner." And your dad was like, "No, it'll wait. You know, we can reheat it." And he wanted to talk drums. He said they talked for about an hour.
absolutely,
You know, that seems
absolutely.
like the kind of guy he
Yeah,
was.
yeah. I'll tell you another quick story before we left. Um, my husband was involved with the Phoenix Suns. My husband's a podiatrist,
Mm.
and he was the Suns' foot doctor. Anyway, Chuck Daly was the coach for Detroit
Mm-hmm.
Pistons, and my father read someplace that he was born and raised in Kane, Pennsylvania. So, I mean, how many people? It was a small town. My husband introduced my father to Chuck Daly, and the two of them went in the back by the locker rooms, and they talked Kane. It was amazing. I mean, they spent an hour talking about it, and that's how my father was.
Yeah,
He just loved being with people.
it seems that way. It seems that way.
Yeah.
I think that's just a great way to wrap it up and just shows what a wonderful man he was.
Yes. Yeah.
And I so much appreciate your time in doing this and talking about your dad and just helping me document this history and celebrate his life because I really am all about preserving this kind of stuff and really keeping his name in the forefront. You know, we
Well,
don't want these people to be forgotten or just be in the pages of a book. We want everybody to remember that
yeah.
these were really important
Yeah.
people. So having someone access
Yeah.
to someone like you is important to me.
Well, thank you. I don't understand. Like, does Slingerland have a Facebook group like
Yeah,
this?
probably. Yeah, I'm sure they do. Yeah.
I mean, this is really a culture.
the right you,
I don't even,
you know the
what do you
the
call it?
Rogers community is pretty tight and smaller because it's not such a big name and it hasn't been around. Well, they've relaunched now, but the real Rogers, the Ohio Rogers, hasn't been around for so long that you know the culture is kind of gone. So the group is pretty small. So and
Yeah.
we stay pretty tight knit, and it's stuff like this is really important to us.
Yes, I don't even know how I found it on on Facebook. And was it Jeff Burke?
Right? Yeah.
Is that? And I think when I saw it, I just wrote to him, and he's the one that said, "Why don't you join the group?" So I did.
I'm so glad you did.
And I don't even go on Facebook now, but every once in a while I'll go in just to see what's happening with Rogers. But um, I think it's, Facebook. It's too much.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much
Just too
sometimes.
much.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, a connection like this
It's keeping you.
wouldn't have been
Yes,
possible.
it's
So
absolutely.
awesome.
Well, I appreciate this, and um, keep me posted and let me know how to get back on and see everything that everybody's doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll stay in touch, and I thank you so much for doing this, Elaine.
Okay, anytime.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you to Elaine Strauss-Cates for being so kind and generous with her time. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. If you'd like to check out the interviews with her father, Ben Strauss, mentioned in this video, I'll link part 1 right here. And if you noticed my shirt, it's just a reminder to go check out Pose Percussion for all your Rogers needs, old and new. Thanks for watching.